Welcome to another lesson in Paintabilities. I'm Shelly James, and I'm excited to be starting on a new series focusing on water. So the next 4 lessons that are coming through Paintabilities, this is the month of March if you're watching at a different time, March 2025. The next 4 lessons we're going to be looking at different landscapes and things that have water in them. So the first one we're going to be working on is this ocean landscape. And the focal point of this photograph is the water splashing on the rocks on the shore. And I just really loved the look of this water, and I want to share with you how to get this spray to happen. It takes a little finesse, a little bit of practice, but I think we'll get there. And so I hope you'll come along with me and let's get going. So I've taken my photograph and I have sized it onto an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper just to print it so that I can get a feel for how to lay out this design. So we're not working from a pattern or anything that I'm going to trace this time. Everything is going to be freehand painting. And so to get this, first we want to get the background in. So we're going to work with our sky and our sand and then put the water in the middle. All right, and then we'll work on our rocks and our spray of water coming up on this through the center and up the right side. So I want to show you that the way I oriented this from the original photograph was I took our rule of thirds, right? And so I have the top third of my design is my sky. The middle third is my ocean backdrop. And then the bottom third is the rocks, and the spray coming up goes through all 3 of them. So it cuts across and breaks those planes. And so I actually took my paper after I printed it out, and I just cut or folded into those thirds, and you can see that it's almost exactly perfect, 1/3 of each segment. So I'm real happy with the way that worked out. But you can take any ocean photograph that you want, print it on just an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. You can crop and size it if you need to before doing that so that you have this orientation, or you can go right from the freehand design that we're going to work on today. Okay, so I'm going to set that aside. It's just for reference. I'm not using this for coloring, or I'm looking at the original photograph for the true color that I want to emulate. Okay, so I'm going to set that right over there just so it's out of the way. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is put out my colors. So for my sky, I'm going to be using a medium blue. These are Plaid FolkArt multi-surface acrylic paints. They are a craft paint, but they're wonderful to use for the purposes of quick and easy paintings, landscapes, flowers, etc. that we use, especially using the 1-stroke technique that I am very fond of and tend to use quite a bit. So first thing I'm going to, then other colors. So the next color is Wicker white. So we're going to be using that to lighten the lower part of our sky and to add some clouds into that sky. And then for my ocean watercolor base, I'm going to be using Prussian blue, and we'll be working in a little bit of that medium blue as we come forward into the shore over the sand. Now my sand color, this time I'm going to be using some coffee latte, which is a darker tan. Okay, and we've got some wicker white that we're going to work into that as we bring it forward under the water in front of us. Everything is under the water. If you look at that photograph, this is actually all water, so we're not having to deal with so much of the beach sand, but there will be sand that goes out past that rock line just a little bit. Okay, so let's get our sponge. This is a Donna Dewberry 1-stroke painter sponge. I'm going to get my fingers damp with enough water to cover the bottom of this sponge. I don't want to be too skimpy with that, but I'm not trying to saturate the sponge. Okay, and then I'm going to pick up some medium blue, quite a bit of it on the round end of that sponge, and I'm going to add wicker white as we go along and come down towards that middle or bottom of the top third. Okay, so you're going to make circles And I apologize for the camera movement. Let me take this off my table and then it won't move the camera. All right, so you make circles to work the color into the canvas, the grooves, etc. The white of the canvas is a color working with us on this, so it is lightening that blue a little bit for us. Now, as I start to come down towards this bottom edge of this top third where it's going to meet the horizon, I'm going to pick up some white on the round end of my sponge. I'm going to turn my sponge this way, and I'm going to work that white into that lower edge of that sky a little bit more. Okay, and I can go right past my horizon line. That's perfectly fine. We're going to put our water on there anyways, and then I'm just letting that back end of the sponge lighten or blend and soften the color of the sky. Right, so we've got a lighter bottom edge of that sky as it meets the horizon, and then the back end, top third of this is darker. Okay, so now I'm going to take a little bit more white, and we're just going to add a little hint of clouds in the background. All right, they're not real obvious, and some of it's going to just be behind the water spray. All right, so just very lightly working a little light white into the sky. They're real soft touches of clouds. Get a little bit stronger in this lighter area so it'll show up. Okay. A little bit over there. All right, so just little touches of them. And you can kind of wisp them away or leave them. Okay. All right, so now what I want to do is I need to add my sand color because that's going to be underneath my water. So I want to take a paper towel and we're going to wipe off as much of this color from our sponge as we can. We're going to do this again after we put the sand on there, or you can switch to another sponge. It's up to you. Okay. Okay, so now I'm going to come and get coffee latte, work that into my sponge, grab some white, work that in. All right, we're just going to lighten this up a little bit. And I'm going to turn my canvas around, so we're just working from the bottom. All right, and I'm going to make circles again. A little more white. A lot of this is going to be behind those rocks, but over here it's going to show underneath the water a little bit. And then get the sides of your canvas while you have that color on your sponge. You always want to do that. Okay, so it's just color underneath the water. There isn't any kind of movement or anything because it's very smooth. Okay, so let's turn that back around. So you'll notice I've allowed my sky to go over my horizon line. I've allowed my sand to come up into my ocean background. So now I can add the ocean itself, and that's a darker blue, so it's going to come over both of those. So I'm going to go ahead and wipe off that sponge again, get as much of that tan out of there as I can. I'm going to need a little more white on, I think. Well, for sure I'm going to need it later. Okay, so we're going to load with Prussian blue. All right, nice dark blue. I'm going to get just a touch of the medium blue and kind of work that in. We're going to go just a shade lighter. So working those colors together. Okay, and what you're going to do is you can turn your painting so that it's horizontal to you, so you can pull a vertical line towards you. And it's so much easier to do that when you have it oriented directly in front of you. Okay, so I'm going to find my horizon. Remember, we divided this into thirds. So this is an 12 by 16. So this is 16 inches wide, right? We're going to kind of come right here and every 5 inches or so, which my sponge is actually, I think, about 4 inches long. So right about here, maybe. Okay, so right about there. And so I'm just going to touch my sponge down. I'm going to push to get a nice strong line, and I'm going to pull straight towards myself to get a nice straight horizon. I hope. Okay, that just helps us set that back edge. And then you want to get your sides while you're at it. Then you can turn, and it should be fairly straight. Okay, so now we can come forward and I can pick up more color. So Prussian and medium blue together. And we're going to just go straight across. Getting the edges. Okay, a lot of this is going to be backdrop for that rocks and wave that's coming up towards us. All right, so we're getting kind of close to the bottom edge of what will be that water, and then the rocks will be in front of it. And I want to get just a little bit of white mixed in with that color. And I'm going to turn my sponge this way so that I can soften it back into the darker color in the background. Right through here. And then I can turn it back this way and let that water come forward. So there you go. Apologize for all the shaking. And just making sure I've got my edges colored. And I think we are good for that. Now, before I put this sponge in the water, I can take a little bit of white on the very round edge of the sponge, and I can come right out here and just kind of tip that edge down and just get the start of what will be some waves coming forward in the distance. Okay. Okay, so it's just for placement. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and fold this sponge up and put it in my cubby for later. Okay, so now we want to work on our rocks and get those in place, because those have to dry, and while they're drying, then we can do the detail in the water in the background, and then we'll be ready to do our splash. And this will be a real quick and easy lesson. Okay, so I'm going to put out some Asphaltum. This is one of our matte acrylic colors. So it's not a multi-surface. It's going to have more of a matte sheen to it. And then I'm going to get some burnt umber as well. All right, so those are going to be my 4 rock colors. I'll have burnt umber, asphaltum, coffee latte, and some wicker white. So let's pick up a 16 flat. And I want you to see, let's look at our reference photo again. I want you to see how big these rocks are, right? They're taking up a third of the space on our canvas. So we're going to go pretty big with these. I could actually go up to a larger brush. Let's go to a 3/4 flat. Okay. So I'm going to get that damp, lay it on paper towel, and then we're going to come and get our main color, which is going to be this asphaltum. right? And so I'm going to work that into my brush. And we're going to just create, now you could sketch this rock out if you feel more comfortable with it. I'm just going to kind of sketch it with my brush, okay? So this top rock here is going to come right there and goes right off the side of the canvas. I should say the right rock. And then it has a flat bottom right here. Okay, so that's the rough image of that. Then the water comes through here, and then you have another rock that comes down. We got a little bit of a gap there, and then that comes forward right through here and off this side. So a little crevice right here where the water is splashing and pouring through. Okay, so let's come down a little closer so we can see the texture on these rocks as they're creating them. I'm going to also put out just a little bit of floating medium, as these matte acrylics do tend to be a little drier on a canvas. So we need a little medium to work in to help that move. Okay, so just to get the base shape, right? These are kind of granite-y looking rocks. So I'm going to come down at an angle. We're going to pull straight down, and then I'm going to go on the other side. Let's get a little more of this color, right? And we're going to go straight down on this side and pull down here. So the looser and rougher you can do these rocks, the better. If you make them smooth, they're not going to look very natural. I'm going to grab some burnt umber, and we're going to pull that up a little more. Okay, so rough, loose, letting some of that dark show. And this is starting to dry, and I'm leaving all that texture in there for now. All right, I'm going to come and get some more of the asphaltum with some medium, and we're going to put the base in for this rock. This goes right off this left edge here. And I'm going to get my burnt umber, and we're going to come here and create the dark bottom edge and pull that up. And then I can take a little bit more of that burnt umber and just kind of tap it in here and there, create some darker areas on these rocks. All right, now I'm going to wipe that brush off, and I'm going to come side load some coffee latte. Get a little medium in there too. All right, and we're going to hit some light areas. There's a glare there. Let's bring this over here. There we go. So we're going to pull some light areas down here. Is my rock going to look exactly like the one in the photograph? Probably not. Let's get some of that asphaltum and tap it right in there. Right in there. So you can see I'm kind of laying this paint on heavy. I'm not using much pressure, so it's staying dark. I'm going to pick up burnt umber, pull up some dark areas in there again. grab some of that coffee latte, pull some light down. Now I'm going to just at the very end here, first let me finish this. Okay, so now at the very end here, I'm going to come and side stroke just a little bit of wicker white on that edge here, and we're going to sputter this down. Okay. That's a little too much, so let's take that back off. Just work that in a little bit to the heavy paint that's on there. Grab a little of the burnt umber. Okay, so you can kind of get a feel for this. I want this to come down to a point down here. Okay. Okay, so you can do as much or as little texture on there as you want, but we've got to let that dry, and then while that's drying, we're working on this. And then while those are drying, we'll be doing the wave work in the background. So we've got this one. This has got some asphaltum and coffee latte, or excuse me, burnt umber already in it. So now I'm just going to come and put on some coffee latte. Grab a little bit of white. And I'm just kind of pushing my brush, pushing that paint into the wet paint that's already on there. A little more coffee latte. And then I'll get just a touch more white here. Now I lost my dark, so I can come get some asphaltum and stick that right back in there. Actually, wipe your brush off first, then get asphaltum. And lay that in there. I'm going to lay a little more in here. Now that first layer is setting up, so it's letting me put some more on there. So corner of the brush, just kind of tapping that in there, getting the texture of those rocks. I want just a little bit of light down here in a few places. I think right there. Not as light as the top, but not as dark as the rest of the bottom. So just touches of coffee latte worked into that wet asphaltum. Help create some of those crevices. Okay. I think that's pretty good. Let's just get a little burnt umber right in here. There. I kind of like the texture on this rock a little better, so I might work this just a little differently. There we go. So pushing that corner of the brush, kind of working that paint together and creating a little bit of texture. So I'm just tapping the corner of the brush And this paint is really wet still, so I think we're going to have to probably get the dryer out before we do the water. This is also going to help you get some rough edges on your rocks. So there. I think that looks a little better. Okay, so we're going to let those dry, and I'm going to come to my angle brush. So I have a 5/8 inch angle brush here. And this is going to help us to do some of our wave work in the background. So the first thing I want to do is get that damp, lay it on paper towel, and we're going to come pick up, we're going to load this with the Prussian blue. All right, and so remember back out here where this wave was starting to turn. So we need to darken underneath that first. So I'm just going to pull some Prussian blue right up underneath there. Okay, just to give it some shadow underneath the wave. And then let's come out here. Now the thing is, as you're doing this, it still needs to go with the horizon. So still straight across. You're not curving, right? You're not adding any rounded edges, okay? So the orientation is still straight this way. All right, now I can take that same color and just kind of sputter across with little pressure and lift, pressure and lift. But again, everything is still going straight across. Let's get a little bit of that medium blue in there. And we'll add some light. Come back to the Prussian. Get a little, work a little medium in with that on the brush. I think that's going to help it move a little easier. So I want you to see what I'm trying to create here with these strokes, right? Is all these little peaks and dips and things like that in the water. So some of them are lighter, some are darker, but you've got to have the dark to see the light. So you're just coming across and pressure and little sputters. All right. Okay, now I'm going to come and get that same Prussian blue, a little bit of white, medium, a little more blue. Okay, now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my mop, and this is already starting to dry and kind of set up. And so what I want to do now is we're going to take, this is a 3/4 inch mop, I'm going to get this medium on this. All right, and then we're going to get some Prussian blue worked in with that medium. All right, and while this is still wet, I'm going to drag across. A little more Prussian. Let's get a touch of white with that. And more medium. There we go. So it's leaving the strokes that I put underneath there, but it's softening and pushing them back a little bit. Grab that, a little more white. Plenty of medium on my brush. So now those strokes don't look so stark. They're more muted and part of the water instead of on top of the water. Okay. Now I'm going to continue with this medium and this blue, and we're going to come right between these two rocks right here, carefully. If I pick up a little brown, it's okay, but I just don't want a lot. All right, and then we're going to come forward just a little at the base of these. Okay. Now I'm going to set this aside. Actually, I can go ahead and clean this. I just have to dry it really well. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and dry this real quick, and I will be right back. Okay, so let's come back to these waves real quick, and then we'll be ready to do our water splashes. So I've got my 5/8 inch angle brush again. I'm going to load this with some white. All right, not a lot, but just a nice load on the whole brush. Okay, and so out here, where these little wave caps are starting to break, I'm going to put my brush horizontal. I'm going to come along, I'm going to dip down that edge and then stand it back up. Actually, let's come from this direction because I want them rolling over towards me. And then stand it back up. Okay, then right here, there's one that's coming over this blue that we put in there. Bouncing it down and then standing it back up. Okay, you can also just take right here, do tipping that toe forward and then coming back to the top. And it's always straight across lines that you're doing this with, okay? And the direction, notice how when I pulled it from left to right, it dipped down and the angle of the wave looks like it's going to my left. And so I actually want it to go to my right. So you have to come from that direction and then go from right to left with that, okay? Okay, I think we're good. There might be a few little touches and sputters here, but nothing else that I think we need. Okay, so now we're ready to do this wave crash. And so the first thing we need to do is you have to look at this in terms of layers. And so the water itself isn't white, it's frothy. And so you have to start with the color of the water with some white added in it. So if I get a little bit of this Prussian blue on, and you can use a scruffy brush, right? The 3/4 inch scruffy brush that we have in the one stroke line. Looks like this. I prefer to use the mop because it gives a little softer look to it. Okay, so I've got all this Prussian blue, and then I'm going to pick up a whole bunch of white, and I'm going to work that together. So it's like a very, very pale blue, but it's matching the tone, the tint of that Prussian. Okay, so a lot of that color in my brush. And so what I'm going to do, let's come down here. Right, we're going to come from behind this rock right here, and we're going to tap this color in, and it leaves these natural holes in it, which is what the water is actually doing, is it's frothy, so it's like bubbles. Okay, so I'm coming across, and then I'm going to come right across the face of this rock. And I'm hoping you can see this isn't white, it's a very, very pale blue. And I'm rolling the brush so that I can get a different angle using this insides and outsides of the brush. And right here, we're going to come through there. And then right through here. Now in this area right here, it is a little bit even darker, so I can come in with some stronger Prussian right through there because there's a shadow being cast. From the wave that's lifting up, it's casting its own shadow. Okay, and then we're going to come right down here in front, and we're not doing the entire spray, we're getting the base of it. Okay, so right up through here, and then it comes right down in front of this rock and off the bottom. All right, now there's a whole lot more that's spraying up here. I'm going to back up just a touch. All right, and so we're only going to come up about as high as the water line. Right, maybe just a little up here. But when it's up there, it needs to be brighter. So that's when we're going to do the white. Okay. All right, so now I want to come and let's wipe off as much of that blue white as you can onto paper towel. I don't want to go to water. All right, now I'm going to come get just white. So a whole bunch of white tapped into that brush. And I want to push it, tap it, open it up on my plate, on my palette. So it creates those round cells, okay? And we're going to come right through here. See the difference? That it's creating a lighter color on top of the dark. We're going to come right through here. Let that fall over. See the difference in color? And I'm not covering or completely hiding my darker color. It's sitting on top of it. I need a little more white. Okay, we're going to come right through here. See the cells in the open that's created by the openness of this mop, okay? All right, and then we're starting to come up very lightly into this area. Now it's showing. But I'm still not completely defining the shape of the top of the spray. Okay, there's one more step we have to do for that. Okay. I think I'm trying really hard not to overdo it with the white. Okay, I think that's good. Now I'm going to go ahead and put that in water, and we're going to get an old toothbrush. And I'm going to put my thumb right in paint. And I'm going to get water with that and get that with my white. Okay, and you're working this together. It's not real runny, watery. So if it's looking like it's real drippy, and it's going to be transparent. So you have to kind of test it. See there, it's kind of drippy still. So I need more white, less water. There, now I'm not getting any drips off my brush. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to come through very controlled, raking your thumb across the bottom of that brush, creating that spray. Now here I got drips. Thought I had it good, but I didn't. So you just take a paper towel. Okay, so face down to it, creating the spray around the outside edge of the water. And you're going all the way up to the top. And you're letting that spray. And that's what's creating that frothy outside edge of the water. Okay. So now we have our spray. And then we just need to finish this with a little few final touches. I'm going to take a Filbert brush. You can use a Filbert or a flat. And I'm going to get some of this thinned white. And we're going to come right down here and create the sea foam on the water. Oops. I'm going to come right down here and create the sea foam on the water. So it needs to be kind of thin. And you're just with the edge of that, chisel edge of that Filbert. And this is sitting on top of the water. Okay, it's coming up underneath this rock. And you're going sputtering side to side, but it has to be thin. It can't be heavy, stark white. Then you go back and take a look at the picture, you'll see this is in there. Okay. So this has to lay flat now. You don't want any of those drips running until it dries. I don't recommend hitting it with a dryer because it'll force the water drips to go. And then you can see, you can't really come in and add anything with this brush. There's a few places maybe. But there we go. All right, so I'm going to take my script liner. And I will get some, let's get some inky Prussian blue. And we will come back out. And sign this. So this is our first of our series this month on water. And this is a splashing wave over rocks. I hope you enjoyed that lesson. I hope you will give those mops a try. You can do so much with them if you just learn how to play with them and all the different properties that they can provide. Come back next week. We will have another lesson in water. Thank you for watching Paintabilities, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.